Final Fantasy XIV has good characters. No, not those ones. No, I'm talking about the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, your main companions in Eorzea, especially Tancred Waters. The handsome stranger. Don't believe me? I'll prove to you that he is, in fact, more than just a funny little human for you RP tag Mikotes to thirst over. Tancred is a bard. Gladiator. Actually, rogue. Gunbreaker, who becomes one of the Warrior of Light's companions in Final Fantasy XIV. He's a chill mid-lander here, so his species is basically man, NPC. And today, I will be psychoanalyzing him like Sigmund Freud does his failed dates. We'll be studying him from 3 perspectives to be reliable. So, let's look from the psychoanalytic perspective. From that, you think at a glance that Tancred is a slave to his id, or unconscious. In psychoanalysis, we think about 2 big things: your pleasure-seeking, your discipline, and your rationality. That's because he's literally a playboy and...
The famed songstress of Olga. So flowers do grow in the desert.
He's constantly referred to as such. He's seen in cutscenes flirting with women all the time. Sometimes ignoring important events just because he wants to go parley with some hotties. He seems to be more interested in pleasure at a glance, thus we can see the eros, or the chase of pleasure, in this impulsive behavior. But in actuality, I'd argue that he's actually really rooted in his superego, or to be more specific, his conscience. That's because Tancred was originally a criminal who would often go robbing people with other thieves.
Though you may labour to believe it, Tancred was once something of a scoundrel who fraternized with the criminal class in these parts.
Pistola! You jest, of course.
But for a chance encounter with Alphina's grandsire, he might never have left Linsa Lominsa, or received an education in Sharian, or taken up his post in Uldar, which is where he trained in the blade yesterday.
Nymphilia, please!
He was actually given a second chance at life by Lucio. I don't know how to pronounce that. You don't need to know anything more about him other than the fact that he's a grandpa and he's also dead. And then he became an upstanding citizen and member of an organization that hopes to save lives and change the world. One of those things is true. When we view this, we can see the reasoning behind his ungodly amount of discipline. Tancred constantly, despite trying to play it off, overworks himself. He actually overworks himself so much in the base game that he gets possessed by an Asian, which all you need to know is a space demon, forcing himself to go on long expeditions to try and repay Lucio and make up for his absence, even if the man has already passed on. It's clear then that he operates primarily on the morality principle as taught and instilled in him by Lucio. I can't pronounce that. Having been raised by the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, whose mission is to do what is right, he operates on the values defined by his family, or the moral code that his family lives by. So his main drive definitely comes from the concept of family and good old guilt. It is anxiety and internal conflict on doing what he perceives to be right, to follow and repay the perceived debt that he owes to Lucio that fuels a lot of his actions. Tancred receives shelter, food, water, family, all because of one old grandpa. The only thing he asked for in return was for Tancred to contribute to his cause of saving the world, which can be considered an antithesis and complete 180 compared to his initial upbringing of being a brigand. That same upbringing, according to Freud's psychosexual model, that personality is largely formed by stimulation involved in infancy and childhood, which he completely does not have, would also instill a strong presence of the id, further worsening his inner conflict and thus causing the internal pressure of his extreme superego to build and build and build bill. In his previous life, where everything operated on the pleasure principle because no parental figure was present to guide and correct him, he now is forced to suppress those urges in the goal of doing what is right. This late correction in life means a disruption of the natural order of the psychosexual development listed by Freud, and the elements of his subconscious are prioritizing more pleasurable escapades, women being his main fixation. But his morals and convictions to repay his perceived debt, a la superego, are so strong that they often overwhelm his unconscious, often to the detriment of his health. And so he was taken over by an Asian. Having such a strong superego that you get to the point that you basically get possessed by a fantasy space immortal eldritch demon beyond human comprehension is kind of a new low. So, Tancred isn't your ordinary man. He's a strong man. He's an experienced man. And he certainly is a brazen man too. So the Freudian perspective paints him a little plainly. Yes, FFXIV is a JRPG, but that doesn't mean that Tancred is a brooding enemy protagonist who is constantly in pain and agony because he's a slave to his desires. He's not Leonhardt. No, we're gonna go second wave on him. We're doing a humanistic perspective now, and be less interested in whether he had a Oedipus complex or some oral fixation as a child, to focus on what he is as an experiencing being. Humanism is all about what's right. It's about the human experience. What is something universal amongst the human race? Oh, but you may ask, why should we care about that? You may think that humanism is about how children develop as humans, how they develop conditions of worth, but humanism is essentially about being human, not just about infancy, and so it is less about his childhood and more about the individual experiences, how humans are intrinsically good and how they perceive the world. And boy, do we have an interesting example for that. I talked a lot about Lucio earlier and how Tancred was redeemed. It's an easy example to show how his upbringing does not enslave him. He grew up a thief, but chose to become a hero because he desired approval through doing good deeds. This checks all of Carl Rogers' boxes. Intrinsically good? Yep. Develops from child's perception of his parents' approval? Yeah. So what is his condition of worth? It's a simple, heroic thing to protect what he loves. Isn't that cute? And this unconditional love and desire to protect beyond bonds of blood can be seen in his relationships with other people too. Enter Minfilia. If Lucio was the grandpa, then Minfilia is Tancred's daughter. He saves her from a Gobbio as a child and took responsibility for her as a big brother figure. They share a close relationship, and he took care of her for years. While Minfilia becomes a hero like him, he takes care of her similarly to how his parent took care of him. It's about how he prevents her from becoming like him when he was young, a brigand, a thief, someone who didn't have the basic needs that somebody needs to survive. He's a lot different from what he used to be. He's a hero now, someone with responsibility. He went from the bottom of the pyramid of needs and climbed up to someone who found the place that he belongs and people that he loves. Yet again, we have to note that he doesn't have everything still. Remember, he still lacks confidence in himself. He doesn't believe in himself, he doesn't know if he's doing enough. And so we need to check up on his esteem needs. Up here on the big number 4 of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he does fulfill Carl Rogers' theory in that he inherently is a good person, but perhaps he tries to take that responsibility a wee little too far. So now we go on to behaviorism, the third and final topic that we'll be using to play therapist. This is something more detached from emotions and feeling. If humanism appeals to emotion and desire for positive feelings such as validation, behaviorism is more simple, that all behaviors are just learned through interaction with the environment. Tancred is a seasoned warrior, not only from his training under the Scions, but as a former bandit. His background has led to the reinforcement of the idea that strangers around him have nefarious intentions. Having been betrayed numerous times before and subject to being embroiled in one too many ploys, has given him quite the penchant for caution. This is especially true in his caution and disgust against the Asians. Remember how he was taken over by the Asian? Under the Asians' influence, he was forced to commit heinous acts that killed many and stirred chaos without his own control, certainly an experience that would leave more than a bad taste in anyone's mouth. He explodes an entire praetorium for crying out loud and then passes out. And he almost kills all of his friends. This harrowing experience has left him with a negative association towards Asians. He has made the simple connection that Asians as a presence leads to bad things, pain, and suffering. And so, Asians are bad. So check his reaction to Emmet Selk, another Asian you encounter later into the story. He does not present himself as a threat, rather he asks to become the player's ally and gives an offer to help the group. However, Tancred reacts violently as soon as he notices that he is an Asian, pulling out his sword and readying himself to battle the ever-loving crap out of someone who appears to just want to help. But it's the thought that counts, right? This association is a common example of behaviorism. He has a bad experience with Asians and now he distrusts them. Think about it like a cat. Compare a pet cat to a street cat. A pet cat doesn't have any bad experiences with a human and thus does not exhibit aggression. In comparison, a street cat may scratch you if you go near because it was abused by humans before. Similarly, Tancred is basically that stray cat. So, there we have it. We've completely dissected Tancred's character. Kind of. What do you think about Tancred as a character? I believe that he's wonderfully built. He's not so much a brooding, roguish, overpowered character, but a learned man who loves humanity and loves his family even more, albeit a womanizer. Do you like how Tancred was written? Or do you think that some elements of his character aren't aligned with realistic psychological theories? Be sure to let me know!